I think a very important thing you touched on in there was the idea of competitive rates, because you can absolutely hire a bunch of engineers at 50,000, for example, but
Yep.
why would someone who has the knowledge they have, obviously if they really really love what they do, for sure, yeah, they'll do it, but a lot of people, they live in places like LA. You shouldn't live in LA. It's too expensive there. Or New York or other places like that where the
Right.
cost of living is just ridiculously high. And they could work on KDE, or they could go get a job at Netflix or Google or Amazon, or obviously you may not be able to compete with like the top of the top, but competing with like your like at least competing with like the run-of-the-mill dev studio, like that's
Right.
something that needs to be
Exactly.
done. And
Yeah.
otherwise, why would they come work for you unless they really really love what they do?
And to a certain extent, that is what we want, right? We want people who are super passionate. But there's another angle here, which is, I think, less commonly appreciated, which is you cannot have an organization made entirely out of superstars. And that's what most FOSS projects are. They are purely made out of superstars. Like everybody who's volunteering their time, top 5% of the industry. But the problem with only hiring superstars is that superstars are really ambitious. They may not necessarily want to stay with you long term. They may want to increase their salary and be making $300,000 a year working somewhere else, you know? And ambitious people are also like superstars are used to getting their way. And when you have a whole bunch of superstars, often they have difficulty coming to consensus on something.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at something like bug triage, right? Bug triage does not require a superstar. Bug triage requires somebody who is detail oriented, somebody who is personable, somebody who has empathy for others, somebody who has technical skills. So, like, normal levels of these things, right? Like, this is somebody who probably could be paid 50 or 60 or 65 or $70,000. They don't need to be paid $100,000 a year, and they would be happy. And then they would stay and do it for 10 years and gain institutional knowledge. Um, and I think the same thing is true for developers. Like, not everybody needs to be a superstar. Some people can just be slinging code, taking direction from others, not being dramatic. If you look at most organizations, that's what they're like. You know, you're not going to have all of your colleagues being superstars.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a range of people whose interests and motivation range from I love the company and I love the product, all the way through I want to make a living and feed my kids and be able to afford my health insurance,
Right.
right? And that's perfectly valid. And when we require everybody to be superstars, we're excluding those people who, frankly, have something to offer as well. And they're also usually a lot cheaper than superstars. So I think there's that element of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do, regardless of that, need to pay market competitive rates. Something I hear a lot is people say, well, you don't actually really need to pay competitive rates because you can just hire somebody from India and they only need, a third the amount of money, right? Well, anybody in India who's going to be doing that is also looking for other remote work jobs where they will be making 3 times as much money. So you do actually have to compete
Yeah.
on that sort of salary, right? Like
Yeah, like
if this person from India is looking at your job, they're also looking at jobs from Siemens, from
right.
Google, from Facebook, and they're not going to say, "Oh, well, it's okay that I'm in India. I'm going to accept less money." They're going to want more money. Of
Yeah,
course they will. Who wouldn't?
if they have basically native level English skills, they're a very competent developer. Like, yeah, they're not gonna like
Right.
you're not talking about like just like some random person on Fiverr, where you're getting like something thrown together. It's like they're working for basically nothing. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who, if they wanted to, they could like the only reason they live in India is because they were born in India. Like they could go anywhere else and they would be just fine.
Yeah. Like that's exactly it. When you're hiring people for remote work, these are people who could be mobile.
Yeah.
And so they're going to demand global level competitive
Yes.
wages, not
Yes.
local level competitive wages.
Hmm. Yeah. I like this is a tough issue. I'm glad that there is a lot more funding coming in. Do you have any ideas for like possible future fundraising? I know that I back when it happened, I talked to the guys who set up the Thunderbird fundraising campaign that was done, where they have massively, massively increased their funding.
Amazing.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you'd want to go like do some sort of pop up like they did, and like what sort of like it worked really well, but I don't know really
Yeah, so
what
I'm
ideas you
actually
would have
writing
here.
one. I have a little project that I've been writing that does that.
Mhm.
Once a year around Christmas, it shows a little tiny notification in the corner and it says, "Hey, if you love it, please share the love." Once a year.
Mhm.
And if you are enraged by the mere thought of this, you can click the shut up and go away and never bother me again button. And then that's it.
Mhm.
But I think this has the potential to be super important because our experience with fundraising so far has been when you ask, people give. Not everybody, but when you ask, people give. And we've been so timid about asking for so long. We've been afraid of money. We've been afraid of fundraising. We've been afraid of growth. We've been afraid of hiring and looking corporate. And we're at a point where KDE is important to the world. And we need to acknowledge that maintaining that has grown beyond the ability of random volunteers to contribute. And I'm not disparaging our random volunteers. They are universally in the top 5% of their careers. They are amazing, but there's not enough of them. And we can't rely on it because people's level of time and motivation changes, right?
Right.
You may be a passionate volunteer in your 20s or when you're a college student and then you get a job and you get married and you have kids and suddenly where'd all the volunteer time go? That's not because you suddenly lost interest in KDE. It's because you gained many other things that are competing for your time. And so I think especially when you're talking about engineers between the ages of like 28 and 50, we have to pay or else we're just not going to get these people.
Mhm.
And that's why I think you see such a gulf. Like you see so many students, you see passionate students, and then you see like retired people or early retired people. And everybody between those age groups are like either sponsored to work on KDE or are like unemployed, taking a pause from their work, or they have like a really easy job that lets them sit in front of a computer all day. If you want those kinds of professionals, you got to pay.
Right.
There's just no way around it.
Yeah. But that's expensive. That's very expensive.
Like it's not what people want to hear because we all love the freeness of it. We love the ability to download an ISO and get all this stuff for free, and that's amazing. But it's one of those trite things where you have to say freedom isn't free, right?
Yeah.
And the meme here is that, okay, well, if you're not paying with your time, you're paying, or if you're not paying with your money, you're paying with your time in the form of bug triage and troubleshooting, but you can pay with your money as well if you want to make the project better in a way that will make you not required to be paying with your time.
Yeah,
it's kind of our choice as users.
We can go back to the whole like definition of free software. It's free as in freedom, not free as in beer. And I know that's like a kind of like a funny meme thing to say, but no, it is very, very true. Like that is the way this works. It is like, yes, the entire time that we're doing stuff, it has also been free as in beer. Like you haven't paid for the software. There have been exceptions where you might pay for support, for example, but the software itself you're not paying for. So I think a lot of people have gotten into their heads, and I've definitely had these people in my comments where they're like, well, no, it's free and open source software. Like, why would I need to pay for it? And obviously this isn't most people, right? But it's still that most people don't, even if it's like $1, right? Like, most people are not funding any of the projects they use. And they don't have to give their entire salary to it. And if they can't afford it, obviously that's totally understandable. But if you can afford to give a little bit here and there, like $1 here, $5 here, like, yeah, it might not seem like that much for one person, but if 10,000 people do that, if 100,000 people do that, that suddenly makes a massive difference. If 100,000 people gave $5 to KDE, that would be massive.
Boom. Big deal. Yeah, it's the law of large numbers. And that's what you were talking about with Thunderbird before, too. I think the average donation amount was something like $22, like not a huge amount of money. And they managed to raise like $7.5 million off of this. So they just got, several 100,000 people to donate the price of two pizzas. And boom, suddenly they have all these resources that they can use to drive the project forward in a sustainable manner and
Mhm.
offer careers to people working on it.
And it's not just this is one thing I did talk about when I had the Thunderbird guys on. It's not just a matter of we have funding now, we can hire someone for a year. It's a matter of doing it in a sustainable way, because
Right.
you don't want to just hire contract workers and nothing but contract workers. You have the exact same problem you have with volunteers then, where
Yeah.
you have someone who comes in, they do a lot of great work, and then now they're gone. All of the knowledge
This
they
is
have
the
with them
problem
is
with
gone.
grants and grant money is that you apply for a grant, the grant gives you $300,000,
Mhm.
and then you use that to pay people to do a particular project, and then that's it. The money runs out and they're gone. And it's nice to be able to have project-based fundraising that way when you do actually have a specific project that you could benefit from. But so much of the time, what we're looking for is just operating expenses so that we can hire people long term and let people make careers out of it so that we can benefit from their institutional knowledge staying in KDE.
Right.
Because when you think about it, if you hire somebody for a year or two and they complete their project and the funding runs out and then they leave, they're taking with them all that knowledge that they gained while working on the project.
Mhm.
And hopefully the project itself stands alone on its own and it continues to be useful. But if they're gone and they took their knowledge with them and nobody else stepped up to maintain the project, it's a tough situation to be in. It's much better to have operating funds that you can use to employ people on a steady basis and not be jumping from grant to grant to grant.
Yeah.
And I know this is sometimes the way it is, right? And there are people who make a career on being funded by one grant and then doing another one and doing another one. But honestly, that's like half of your job in that case is applying for grants.
Mhm.